So, Mark, how long do you intend podcasting for?
Well, I think there should be term limits. I don't think we should be doing it when we're in our 90s. But there's no such thing with American politicians, is there? They keep on going.
On Capitol Hill, the man chairing the Oversight Committee today, Chuck Grassley, is 92 years old.
Yeah, absolutely extraordinary. And at times he sounded it, didn't he?
You have a long way to go, Mark.
Yeah. I'm Mark Stone in the Sky News Bureau here in Washington, D.C.
And I'm David Blevins, back for more. On the podcast today, is America about to have Trump's face on its currency?
Yes. And Attorney General Pam Bondi, the top lawyer in the land here, has faced a grilling from senators. Democrats put her on the spot about the weaponization of the judiciary and whether she's hiding details about Trump's relationship with him, yes, Jeffrey Epstein. It was a truly remarkable spectacle, and we'll take you through it.
But first, the Canadian Prime Minister is in the White House again. So, Mark, the President welcomed his Canadian neighbour back to the Oval Office, and it felt very different this time.
It did. The second visit for Mark Carney. Of course, he became Canadian Prime Minister a few months into Donald Trump's second term. The first time he was here, I think, was back in May. And it was a prickly, awkward exchange, an Oval Office moment that I certainly remember back then. Of course, the backdrop was all of Trump's tariffs, so many of them on Canada. And from Canada's perspective, so many of them so unfair because they were tariffs that Trump put in place because he said that street drug fentanyl was coming over the northern border from Canada, which incidentally it wasn't, not in any great number at all. But the tariffs were put on. And then, of course, there was all that stuff about Canada being the 51st state. Mark Carney's predecessor, Justin Trudeau, he was referred to by Trump as the governor of the 51st state. And that sort of rhetoric continued. And so that first meeting back in May was pretty awkward. Not so this time. I thought the tone was really very different. The president couldn't resist the temptation to joke a little bit about Canada still becoming part of the United States, the 51st state, very much still on his mind. But broadly, for me, David, the tone felt different. Trump called Carney a world-class leader, a great negotiator. And on the subject of tariffs, which was clearly the reason for the meeting, I felt that the president's language seemed to be a little bit more conciliatory in tone. Some suggestion that the Canadians would be happy with the trade compromise. And he did use the word compromise. You don't hear Trump saying that much.
Yeah, trade has been a really serious issue for both leaders. When Trump hit Canada with a 35% tariff, Canada was one of the few countries in the world to impose reciprocal tariffs. But Canada's feeling the pain of that trade war too. Carney had to find around $7 billion for loans to keep the big steel and aluminium companies afloat. If this meeting signals the beginning of the end of those tariffs, that'll be a success for the Canadian Prime Minister. He certainly turned on the charm towards the end of the meeting, describing Trump as a transformative leader. Of course, there are many ways to interpret transformative.
Yeah, clever language. It's not clear as we record quite what Mark Carney is going to go home with. It may well take a few days for the dust to settle, but he needs to go home with something. He needed to come to Washington and not go home just with having sat next to the president and delivered a few platitudes, but nothing more. Remember, Canada's still the only country in the G7 that hasn't got a bespoke trade deal or at least a trade relationship with Uncle Sam to the south. And what Carney has tried to do over the course of the past few months is stand his ground, although he has relented on some of the reciprocal tariffs that he initially put in place. I think even he is realizing that trying to butt up against Donald Trump is really a dangerous thing to do. But of course, beyond the talk of tariffs and of the economies of the two countries was Gaza, because their meeting fell on the anniversary of the Hamas attacks 2 years ago, and they addressed the issue of the ceasefire, the negotiations that are ongoing in Egypt. And remember, for Canada, they've taken a position on the whole challenge that is Gaza. They were among the countries that recognized the state of Palestine just a couple of weeks ago in the United Nations. That was clearly not something that the United States wanted to see. But Carney and Trump seem to have managed to put that issue at least to one side. Carney praising Donald Trump for his efforts in getting the Egypt-based peace talks to where they are now. So again, we see what other leaders have done, where they've recognized that actually throwing something to Donald Trump, praising him, telling him that he's done a good thing, it actually can be really quite a useful thing to do.
So Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, the president's key Middle East envoys, it's vital really for the Trump administration that they have joined the other negotiators from Egypt, from Qatar, from Turkey, from Israel, and of course from Hamas. So there is clear momentum there now. So hopes for a peace deal abroad. But the president has also been talking about civil unrest at home, and he's considering some fairly drastic measures to address that.
Mr. President, can we talk about Portland for a second? Are you planning to invoke the Insurrection Act? And that would be, a very long-standing law that's been on the books.
Yeah, well, it's been invoked before, as you know. If you look at Chicago, Chicago's a great city where there's a lot of crime. And if the governor can't do the job, we'll do the job. It's all very simple.
The Insurrection Act, that's the law that gives presidents the authority to deploy the military domestically. So permission to use federal troops, the National Guard, to calm civil unrest when there's a crisis, and to support law enforcement with things like arrests and searches and raids, etc. Trump hasn't used the power yet, but we were talking about this yesterday, the battle that's going on between the Californian governor and the administration as to whether the Californian National Guard can be deployed to Portland, Oregon, to support ICE agents there as they carry out immigration raids. Normally, the Guard is under state command. But if Trump enforces the Insurrection Act...
Sounds like we've got the Guard behind us, actually. We can hear the soundtrack of Washington, D.C. Just outside the studio. But I think the National Guard is here, but that may well be a fire truck, as they say.
And normally the Guard is under state command. But if Trump enforces the Insurrection Act, he could use any state's National Guard anywhere he wants. And that would be a serious escalation.
Yeah, that really will be extraordinary. You're right. The Insurrection Act is kind of the nuclear button when it comes to the powers being given to the president in terms of law enforcement, not used in 30 years, seen as political suicide normally to invoke it. But these are not normal times, so let's see. For now, though, all eyes are on Chicago and the state of Illinois as the Texas National Guard makes their way north, despite protests and frustrations of Illinois' Governor J.B. Pritzker. We talked about him yesterday, didn't we? He is clearly very, very angry. It seems that any day now we will see armed guards in khaki patrolling the streets of the Windy City. Now, David, while I was at the White House with the Canadian Prime Minister, I missed quite the spectacle that you were forced to sit through 5 hours on Capitol Hill, a Senate Judiciary hearing. It was quite the moment.
Yes, lucky me indeed. Cabinet members attend these committee hearings on Capitol Hill. And it was Pam Bondi's turn today. She is, of course, Attorney General. Members of Congress have an opportunity to ask questions. This was described as an oversight committee, but there wasn't much oversight. I'm going to talk first about Pam Bondi's jewellery. Not because it was a fashion statement, but because I think it was a mission statement. She wore 2 necklaces to this hearing, one with the symbol of a cross, the other with the American flag for God and country. So I think the cross was the moral authority to balance the political power that she's exercising, arguably to a greater extent than any previous Attorney General, because she is unashamedly political in the office.
Yeah, I just watched the highlights a moment ago before we started recording. It seems to me she did an expert job at deflection and not answering a single question.
She faced quite a grilling from Democratic senators. They asked about the extent to which she's directed by the White House, her handling of the Epstein files, the weaponization of the judiciary, US strikes on boats allegedly transporting drugs in the Caribbean, and so much more.
Were you consulted by the White House before they deployed National Guard troops to cities in the United States?
I am not going to discuss any internal conversations with the White House with you, Ranking Member.
I noticed that.
I wish you loved Chicago as much as you hate President Trump. And currently, the National Guard are on the way to Chicago. If you're not going to protect your citizens, President Trump will.
There's been public reporting that Jeffrey Epstein showed people photos of President Trump with half-naked young women. Do you know if the FBI found those photographs in their search of Jeffrey Epstein's safe or premises or otherwise? Have you seen any such thing?
You know, Senator Whitehouse, you sit here and make salacious remarks, once again trying to slander President Trump left and right.
The night before James Comey's indictment, you had dinner with the President of the United States. Pretty intimate group.
Actually, there were a lot of people there that night. That's a great
picture. Was
picture.
James Comey discussed at that dinner?
I love that picture. That's a great picture. And there were a lot of people there that night. I think the entire cabinet was there.
Did you discuss James Comey with the President of the United States? He was sitting just to your left.
Well, 2 seats down, yes. 2 seats down. And I am not going to discuss any conversations I've had or not have with the President of the United States.
Because the American public is entitled to know.
I cannot believe that you would accuse me of impropriety. I don't know the answer, Senator.
Yet you do know the answer to that.
Don't call me a liar.
I didn't call you a liar.
You just said I know the answer. I said I don't know the answer.
Well,
you have to talk to Director Patel.
And one of the senators who got to quiz Pam Bondi was Adam Schiff of California.
Yes, I did see this bit. This was quite something.
He's one of the 3 people that Trump told Bondi to go after in a Truth Social post a couple of weeks ago. That list, of course, included the former FBI director, James Comey. He was indicted just days later and is scheduled to be arraigned today after being charged with lying to Congress. And Schiff didn't hold back.
I think it's valuable that the American people get a sense of what you've refused to answer today. So these are just some of the questions you refused to answer, or have answered with personal attacks on members of this committee. You were asked whether you consulted with career ethics lawyers, as you promised you would do during your nomination hearing, when you approved the president receiving a $400 million gift from the Qataris. You refused to answer that question. You were asked who or what role you may have played, or who played the role in asking that Trump's name be flagged in any of the Epstein documents gathered by the FBI. You refused to answer that question. You were asked whether Holman kept the $50,000 bribe money. You refused to answer that question. You were asked whether Holman paid taxes on the $50,000 bribe money. You refused to answer that question. You were asked, did career prosecutors find insufficient evidence to charge James Comey? You refused to answer that question. You were asked, how are military strikes on these boats in the Caribbean legal? And you refused to even answer that question. You were asked,
law degree,
excuse me. You were asked, did you discuss indicting James Comey with the president? You refused to answer that question. You were asked, did you approve the firing of antitrust lawyers who disagreed with the Hewlett-Packard merger? You refused to answer that question. You were asked whether you support a restoration fund for violent insurrections to attack the Capitol on January 6th. You refused to answer that question. You were asked whether you were firing career professionals, career prosecutors, just because they worked on January 6th investigations. You refused to answer that question. You were asked by my California colleague whether you believe government officials, like immigration officials, have to abide by court orders. You wouldn't even answer that question. This is supposed to be an oversight hearing.
Oversight?
Excuse me, you can attack me after my time is over.
You've attacked all of us, including President Trump, for your entire
You can attack me later,
career.
and I know you've got plenty of canned attacks. We've heard them all day today.
Canned attacks on you?
This is supposed to be...
No one needs a canned attack on you.
Regular order, Madam Chair. I'm trying to speak. This is supposed to be an oversight hearing of the Justice Department. And it comes in the wake of an indictment called for by the president of one of his enemies.
Yeah, I mean, that was quite a lengthy series of assertions, questions from Adam Schiff. She looked pretty shifty, didn't she, in her response? Defensive, certainly, and just deflected.
Yeah, for nearly 5 hours, her posture was defensive, kind of delegitimizing the oversight process, I felt, by interpreting every question she faced as a personal attack. And she framed her defence around claims that the Justice Department had been politicised under Joe Biden's presidency and that she is ending that weaponisation, hence her refusal to answer questions about political appointees like Trump's borders are, Tom Homan.
What became of the $50,000 in cash that the FBI paid to Mr. Homan in a paper bag, evidently.
Senator, as Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche recently stated, the investigation of Mr. Homan was subjected to a full review by the FBI, agents, and DOJ prosecutors. They found no credible evidence of any wrongdoing.
And that was not my question. My question was, what became of the $50,000 in cash that the FBI delivered, evidently in a paper bag, to Mr. Homan?
Senator, I'd look at your facts.
Yeah, Tom Homan, a man we've become very familiar with because, like many of Trump's officials, he's accessible. He's at the White House most days. He is available to talk to us. And you heard this story about a $50,000 bag of cash in a brown paper bag. This is a story we haven't covered on the podcast, but it is fascinating. It was revealed a couple of weeks ago that Tom Homan accepted this bag of cash, $50,000, from an undercover FBI agent last year before he was in post in exchange for immigration-related government contracts when he joined the Trump administration. Now, the Justice Department has closed what was a bribery investigation, choosing not to charge Homan with any impropriety. It's certainly quite the scandal.
Pam Bondi was asked about this during the hearing 10 times. And not once did she give any answer.
Yeah, she could have denied it. She could have said it's not true. She deflected to the FBI. She said you ought to ask them. She's deflected to Kash Patel, who's the director of the FBI. But don't forget, they fall under her remit. So it's perfectly fair line of questioning for them to ask her about it. Look, a casual observer from beyond these shores could have watched that 5-hour spectacle and concluded that Pam Bondi bombed the hearing, eaten for breakfast by the Democratic senators, deflecting every question, not offering a single answer. But then she didn't intend to, I don't think. She knew that she could deflect them. She knew that she didn't need to answer them because she knows that half the country, at the last count anyway, is behind her in thinking that it is the radical lefty senators questioning her who are the corrupt ones, the dangerous ones, the ones pulling this country down. It is, David, the divided states. 'Twas ever thus, but now it feels so much more than ever. Now, David, what's all this about Trump on the $1 coin? We mentioned it at the top.
Well, George Washington had been dead for 41 years before he appeared on $1 bills. Benjamin Franklin, 156 years before he appeared on $100 bills. But earlier this week, the administration and the Treasury defended their plans to mint a $1 coin with an image of, guess who? The president, despite that being illegal in the United States.
Goodness me. Yeah, there is a 1866 law that states only deceased presidents can be on legal tender in the United States. It's a law designed to stop the country looking too much like, guess what, a monarchy. But there's no stopping the Donald.
Yeah, the coin will be in circulation by 2026, we are told, to commemorate the 250th birthday of the United States. According to the draft images, one side will feature Trump's profile and the other side an image of him standing in front of the American flag and pumping his fist under the words, "Fight, fight, fight." Heads or tails, Mark?
I'll tell you what, it's pretty extraordinary. But, you know, I can completely imagine it happening in today's America. One more thing before we go. We mentioned on the podcast yesterday that this week was the first week of the Supreme Court back in session. And David, you mentioned that the issue of conversion therapy was on the table.
Yeah, just to remind people, conversion therapy is the practice of attempting to change a person's sexuality using psychoanalysis, behaviour modification and spiritual counselling. It's widely criticised, and Colorado is the state attempting to get the practice banned. But it looks like the Supreme Court may well rule in favour of protecting conversion therapy.
Yeah, it certainly looks that way. The court is skeptical of the ban. There are concerns that banning conversion therapy impacts on First Amendment rights. So interesting indeed, a sign perhaps of what's to come from this Supreme Court session.
That's it for today. Thanks for listening. Do send your emails to us at trump100@sky.uk. And remember, we have a short survey about the podcast in the episode notes. It will only take you a couple of minutes to fill it out, and we'd really appreciate your feedback.
Yeah, please do fill it out. It's in the show notes. Someone put a comment on Spotify today or yesterday saying they couldn't find it. It's there. There's a little link in the show notes. So do look for it and fill it in. And we will be back on Friday.
Bye-bye for now.
Bye-bye.